My name's Brent from Blocmates. I'm the founder and CEO of a growing crypto native media and research hub. I think crypto's very grassroots, and I think you've got to go high risk. Again, don't listen to this is financial advice or anything, but I think you've got to kind of understand narratives like really, really well. And then you've got to be early to ecosystems. If you're marketing to like the average person and you're like a crypto infrastructure product, what are you wanting the end behavior of that result to be? Because I think social media is the new CV. I probably tend to outperform a lot of people in a uptrending market, and then probably tend to give way too much back in a chopping market. But I honestly don't think like the cycle's actually started.
Do you think we'll ever get a bull market as good as 2020, 2021?
Now more than ever, the way that kind of the algorithm is changing, it's...
Excellent. Well, we're here in Singapore with Grant from Blocmates. Can you introduce yourself to start off?
Yeah. My name's Grant from Blocmates. I'm the founder and CEO and intern of a growing crypto native media and research hub.
Well, it's crazy to see like you guys' growth throughout the years, and you guys are investing so much into really high quality content across so many veins, crypto native as well too. So it's been really cool to see your development from like a WordPress website to,
yeah,
it's like Cambrian explosion.
We were kind of really started to grow some traction around about the similar sort of times during that kind of peak of the last cycle and throughout that last cycle. So yeah, it's been a lot has happened. But yeah, it's kind of initially went from a single tone of voice account when nobody's reading this kind of Squarespace website that was like $20 a month to run. And then, now we're a team of like 15, 16 growing and trying to go for world domination, probably a little bit too quickly, but.
Absolutely. I think you guys are like very organic, very crypto native, very much bootstrapped. When you're trying to create a content network and you're competing against like venture-backed startups and stuff, how do you feel about that? Like,
this is always the question, and sometimes I even get it internally from the team. I think you've kind of got to lean into the aspect of it being bootstrapped. Like one of what I'd say would be the superpowers and the USP of what we're doing is we know what the audience wants because we technically are the same audience. We're always kind of, not to use the phrase it's been killed, but like in the trenches, like everyone, we're always trading, we're always investing, we're active participants in the market as opposed to being more editorial focused and then just reporting on what's happening.
Right.
So we'll typically find stuff very, very early. We'll be typically first to report on stuff, and we'll typically be first to kind of cover it in depth. And that's just because kind of the team that we hire for and be really strategic around the hiring process. That lends itself well to people who are active in the market as well, which is really difficult because when you're in a raging bull market, you see everyone's like kind of busy trading as well as supposed to be doing. So kind of like you get content drops off and stuff like that. But and I suppose the other aspect is a lot of people who are raising, particularly in the media space, and they think it's like a well-trodden path. It's very cookie cutter. You kind of go and raise a shitload of money, you go and hire some of the best editorials in the industry, and then from outside of the industry. But then you've kind of got to position yourself as this like unique USP, as I was just previously saying. You kind of got to be as native to what's actually going on in the industry as physically possible, as opposed to just being a kind of Web3 crypto wrapper on a Web2 product, if that makes sense.
Right. Plus, it's interesting to see, like, we saw Professor Crypto win the KOL award. And I mean, obviously, I think
he's in the post, eh?
He's probably like botted to shit. But you guys really exist in like the crypto native universe, right? And you are producing a lot of content on YouTube, a lot of video content, but you're still like crypto native, crypto Twitter, which feels like really is like the heart and the pulse of the industry.
Yeah, man, it's also I don't know anything else. So I'm not going to kind of play media startup founder.
Right.
Like, I just know crypto, and like the way that I kind of pass on the information, knowledge, and everything that I've learned from in the space, and probably got my hand burnt on the stove a couple of times. That's what I kind of tell the team. It's just like, write what you're interested in, what you think the kind of industry's heading. Kind of got to be a little bit trend forecasty, if that makes sense. And then because if we go toe to toe with like the likes of, like, not to name any names, but like the big kind of the big media companies that are in the space, you're never going to win. You're never going to be able to buy like the expensive AdWords on Google to rank
Right.
higher. You're never going to be able to beat the likes of Binance and CoinMarketCap for traffic. So you've kind of got to niche down and then really know the audience. And it's difficult when you're kind of positioning it to try and compete with those kind of people, because if you get traditional marketers coming in who don't really understand the space, or they come in, they don't understand your value proposition, they just want to see like high CPM. They want to see your numbers that Professor Crypto can bring in,
Right.
which are drastically botted. But we all know like that audience base and that kind of those shenanigans that people play, they're never going to move the needle for the people who's paying for the advertising anyway.
Right.
You need a quality of audience, and you kind of get that by not being a dick, just kind of holding your own reputation in the highest regard possible, and just being consistent around people understanding that they're coming to you for high quality research and media.
Mm-hmm.
And then you fundamentally understand that the kind of clientele that are reading and digesting all your content is really, really high quality. So then it's kind of position it as like quality of readership over quantity of readership, which I think's a fool's errand, to be honest, because everyone can play that apples with apples game.
Yeah, well, I was talking to like a Dex, someone who worked at a big Dex, and he was saying that he had run like a partnership with a big crypto YouTuber that converted like 100 users, and then he did like this trial partnership with this random Korean dude who had like a Telegram group, and it converted like 2,500 users. So like the quality audience versus the quantity of audience, I think sometimes it's harder to sell a lower, like a smaller audience that is quite high quality, but often it ends up being better kind of ROI for crypto advertisers. So for what it's worth. What's your kind of end goal with Blocmates? Like, do you just want to continue to do this and scale this the rest of your life? Or like, is there some, what's the grand ambition?
I think it's kind of completely dynamic, because every time I think we're getting comfortable, like, we set some new aspirations and new goals and then like strive towards them and try and hitting them. But I think now, without sounding too like delusions of grandeur or anything like that, I really just want us to kind of challenge with like the biggest in the space. And I think crypto's very grassroots and favors those that are bootstrapped, I think, as well. I think the whole industry is very kind of aware of that kind of that path to kind of success as well. And I think we kind of get a lot of really good kind of peer respect and social kind of proof from people that everyone bump into. It's just like, it's really like just amazing to hear like all the kind words that people say and stuff like that. So, and then when you hear that kind of stuff, and it's just like, well, why not? Like, we're moving in the right direction. Probably takes a lot longer, but I'm not really. I think it's a tricky one when you are in media and you kind of want to raise and want to kind of like just supercharge your growth. But it also definitely sways like biases as well, potentially with the people that you put on your cap table. Despite that, also grant you access to certain like whatever opportunities. I think media should stay as unbiased as physically possible for as long as physically possible. And I think in this industry as well, a lot of people and a lot of companies will probably die by suicide, and you don't even need to kind of go toe to toe with them. You just let them make mistakes, because everyone's chasing the quick buck. So I think if we're just sensible and like trying to uphold reputation above everything else, then I think who knows where we'll get to. Yeah.
Plus, like we are quite early in the crypto content space, and there's a lot of evidence to see that like the most successful media brands are often just like the longest lasting media brands. So, like the Bankless guys would be an example of this. They just like started podcasting in 2018. They're like the longest lasting, and then they've, benefited from that. So, I think if you do, that's kind of one thing I've been hearing a lot is like just zoom out, right? Is like if you view this as a 10-year game, then you can have a lot more stamina and not be focused on the fact that like Popcat dropped 25% today. Cool. Well, I did want to ask you one more thing. I know you guys have a new kind of crypto native product offering. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that's the meal deal. It's like a premium research think about it as kind of like a Mazzari, but for degenerates. It's the easiest way. If you come in cold, that's the kind of easiest way to kind of picture what it looks like and what it feels like. We kind of got to the point where it's like we have all this internal research as well as the free stuff that we've putting out, and I think we've put out over 1,000 research reports over the last like 4 years. Like when I was looking,
that's insane.
Because we had to do a content migration going from that shitty little Squarespace website to then to then a WordPress site and then to Webflow, and now we're going on to like a new site again. And I was just like, we've got how many? So it's just like,
that's crazy.
I think we've given enough away for free at this point where we could probably see if we could churn out a subscription product. And I think it's always wise to have a kind of bottom of the funnel product offering there for people who want it. And I think it's you have to position it in a very, what's the word? You have to be very careful how you position products like that in this industry, because a lot of people don't like to be sold to. People don't like to be sold to regardless. So you've kind of just got it to have it on the periphery. So if people are so far down the rabbit hole in the kind of Blockmates community and like the Blockmates ecosystem, that's there if they want it. It's never going to get rammed down people's throats. And I think that's where people get it wrong sometimes. I think particularly in an industry that is so like full on and so intense and everyone's trying to sell you something,
right?
You just let that passively like be a passive sell to people who actually want it, as opposed to kind of goes completely against all commerce, like everything you should know from selling a commerce or a subscription product. But and then hopefully the product, which we think it is, once people kind of convert and sign up, is strong enough to kind of keep them around as well. So
yeah, I was listening to a podcast with a non-crypto creator that I really enjoy. He's like a cooking YouTuber, and he has a Patreon. And he said for the first year he had the Patreon, he was thinking about like, how can I bring value? How can I bring value? And then he ended up serving the people that subscribe to the Patreon, and they were like, oh no, we just really like you. We want to support like what you're doing. So it was kind of like a little mental flip in his head to like think about, what he offers. And in some ways, like a subscription is like just an opportunity to build community, right?
Yeah.
So
like we've had kind of, I don't know if it was basically at the same time as the initial website, nearly like 4 and a bit years ago, but there was a Telegram group that expanded into a Discord group. I think there's like 5,500 in there now. Extremely active. So that was kind of like just a bolt onto what was already there. And I think it's quite interesting because when we kind of look at what else is out there and what else on the kind of media side, that doesn't necessarily seem to be that aspect tied into a lot of people's companies or products as well. And that was just kind of born from, well, they just want to kind of meet like-minded people, and people always want to find a tribe within the industry and shit like that as well. And wasn't really thought about as a huge part of what kind of we built at Blockmates. But like if you take a step back, that's the essence of everything there, really.
Plus you guys, like, if you look at Blockworks researcher or whatever, venture back kind of media research startup, it's like they'll talk about, they kind of have their lane. And one thing that's really cool about Blockmates is, you guys have covered, like, if whatever narrative, whatever thing, whatever trend, right? I guarantee you guys have covered it. Like ordinals, I'm sure there's something about it. Like, some weird L1 that was popular in 2021. Like you probably have content on that, and like that just it creates an advantage for like the top of the funnel where it's like we're degens, right? And you guys are so universal. You're not focused on one thing, and I think that appeals to like the average crypto user who's curious about new narratives, who's curious about trends, curious about all that.
Yeah, it's that or like really specialized, and I think there's definitely opportunity for both. But generally, that the way that this industry is, it's quite flavor of the week. It's quite like the pace that the industry moves in, which is why I kind of think like long-term holds on certain stuff is quite a stupid strategy, to be honest. But the pace that the industry moves, it's very, very, very difficult to kind of niche down and then nail your kind of calls to the mast on like, this is what we're going to specifically do. Because then if you keep flip-flopping in between, we're like doing modular stuff now, and now we're doing like deep in, now we're going to do AI. It's like, I think you've got to go more horizontal as opposed to vertical, particularly in media, because there's so much to cover. And your specific niche It'll definitely get it to stay in the sun. Don't get me wrong. But it might only be for a quarter of the year, and then everyone's gone. Like so.
Yeah, so you have to be adaptable in that way, or you can kind of bet on something that you think is going to be like a secular winner for whatever reason, like some ecosystem. Cool. Awesome. So I want to get into kind of the what I'm hoping to title this podcast, which is like what I would do if I started crypto from zero. Because you've been here. I don't know, when did you start in crypto?
2017. Like spent way too much of my kind of student money on crypto and then had to figure my way out of it.
So you've been here like what, almost 8 years now, maybe?
Don't say that. That makes me feel ancient.
That's crazy. Yeah. And now there's like a lot of people that have been in crypto 10 years plus, which is terrifying to imagine that possibility. But so, and obviously you've created success, whether, you know, obviously in trading and investing and angel investing, and then in the media brand as well, and personally. But I'm curious, you know, imagine you're a student today, you've got, you know, $1,000 or $500 or something, and you're starting in this space today. Like, for someone who's kind of like that and listening to the podcast and looking for opportunities in crypto, how would you frame that?
Which camera will just to kind of caveat by saying this is not financial advice, and if you listen to me, you will lose absolutely everything. I think the first question you got to ask when you're in that position is, one, is this money that you can completely just set on fire, and how quickly can you make that money back doing something that you know is consistent income? So for me, like thinking back, like I was working like a bar job, still studying, doing my masters and shit like that. But then I was like, probably a little bit more than I should be spending, but I guarantee if I did extra shifts and stuff like that, I'd be able to get it back. So it's not the end of the world.
Right.
I don't think you should be playing. Well, I think it has to be multi-dimensional. I think you should be playing as much of the kind of free airdrop speculation game as possible, without that being your sole strategy.
Right.
And you really have to understand kind of what games you're getting into when you're playing stuff like that. So for I wouldn't have went for like the eigenlayer stuff. Anything that's TVL based, where it's just purely how much can you deposit and how long can you leave it for, you're not going to come out of that game on top. You need to be looking for like the obscure players, the ones that kind of people aren't talking about. ICO drops and stuff like that. Like those kind of websites, they will show you every single expected airdrop that's coming up and every kind of way that they think that you should be kind of approaching that. But that cannot be like a one-dimensional strategy. That's a very easy way to kind of set a small portion of the portfolio and potentially get a large increased APR for that. And then that hopefully comes back and it's worth something.
Plus there's two components there. One is like you can wash trade that, you know, like you can be executing some other strategy on Arbitrum and then you qualified for the Arbitrum airdrop. And who knows if there's still opportunities as good as that right now, but like you don't have to like necessarily dedicate that money just to airdrops, right? It's multifaceted there.
Yeah. And usually the rule of thumb of that is, I think my personal opinion is, if it's a TVL game, then kind of stay away from it, because it's never going to be sizable and you're never going to be satisfied. I do worry about certain products that are coming to markets, like no names mentioned, like the amount of people that are climbing all over each other to kind of get in these kind of galaxy campaigns and like do all this social grind. And I think that's never going to end well, and I don't think people are going to be satisfied. Aside from that, I think you've got to go high risk. Again, don't listen to this is financial advice or anything, but I think you've kind of got to go for your very limited kind of market cap as the coins that, and you've got to kind of understand narratives like really, really well. So kind of, I suppose we're recording this kind of over talking and everyone's speaking about Sui, or everyone's speaking about Phantom and Sonic. There's probably ecosystem players there that are going to capture multiples over the next coming weeks if like this trajectory continues. And I think you've got to be curious, you've got to be early enough, and you've got to be just trying shit out. Because if you're curious early and trying shit out, you're going to stumble upon something that you see value in before everyone else has as well. And then you can make an outsized asymmetrical bet with, even if it's a small amount of money, that could yield you a large amount of money. But the issue is what a lot of people will find is, if they've hit their first kind of like home run, they've hit their first kind of 10x, you can kind of fall under this pretense that you've cracked the code, and one, you usually have to round trip it all to zero to figure out, I'll never do that again. So there's that aspect of it as well, which you're obviously only going to learn from bad experience. It's kind of your tuition that you have to pay back. And people still do it now, but I'd go kind of multi-dimensional with regards to airdrop farming, more niche players on that. And then you've got to be early to ecosystems. You've got to be kind of like over there riding narratives and understand that you need to get off the train before it crashes as well.
So how do you distinguish between like an ecosystem that is kind of having this artificial marketing push and might not have like real value, and an ecosystem that, you know, is really going to have increases in on-chain and activity and volumes and it's kind of organic growth?
Even if this might sound a bit stupid, but even if I know it's kind of a bit of a fabricated push, if the flows back it up, then I'm still going there. But you've got to appreciate that despite a lot of it being smoke and mirrors, you've got to understand that if the smoke and mirrors are large enough, they're going to draw other people in. You need to be in before them and out before them, and that's just a whole different game where it's just you're just riding the flows. There's some that are happening now that's quite smoke and mirrorish, I think, and there's a lot of kind of announcements that are a little bit vanity metrics driven, but you've got to understand that those effects work on a lot of people. Like just vague partnership announcements and kind of paying people to kind of push ecosystems, that's sometimes enough to kind of get TVL. You need to make sure TVL is actually following in from that. And if there's positive momentum, it's just the same game anyway. So you can still kind of churn out decent percentage or decent multiples on those ecosystems, even if you know for a fine fact it's all a bit of a scam. Which is kind of like, ethically, should you be playing that game? But it's just a game,
it's
innit?
just the market, yeah. And so you think more about kind of like inflows to an ecosystem than attention, or, you know, watching specific influencers or something like. How do you measure that?
I think it all has to. When you've done it for long enough, there's kind of these like weird kind of cues that you pick up on that you can't necessarily put your finger on. If you were to quantify it properly, you have to look at kind of inflows to the ecosystem. Obviously, DeFi Alarm is the king for that. If you can pick it up and it begins, maybe it's a coincidence following announcements or something, and then turns into a trend. If you're there early enough, there's still going to be enough meat on the bone when like the ecosystem starts ripping. And if it doesn't, you quite quickly easy bridge out. Stuff gets sustained and stuff gets tied to the native token of the ecosystem as well. So if you use Sui or Phantom for an example, if Sui and Phantom or this new Sonic token continue to move up, then the ecosystem should act as higher beta depending on what you're buying. You also have to understand what you're buying in those ecosystems as well, because people have already played the ecosystem game many, many times over. So if you're buying something that has extreme APR because it's a kind of incentive token, like a lend and borrowing token or like a pool 2 token and stuff like that, you're probably still going to catch some wind of it, but then eventually people are going to start farming it to death. So the ideal situation is if you can catch an ecosystem early enough, there is an airdrop in that ecosystem and then compound it into like the native token. But you should always be looking to kind of trade in and out of the native token, in my opinion. So like the Solana trade, the show is perfect for that, because you could hold Sol, and if you knew you're going to outperform Sol with like some of these ecosystem players, and you'd just be trading into that and then compounding back into more Sol. But if you weren't going to outperform Sol, just sit on your hands and don't do anything. You don't feel comfortable doing that, which takes a lot of practice and a lot of losses along the way as well. Then, you know, you kind of just sit stagnant in it.
So kind of have the attitude where it's like, I'm comfortable denominating in this ecosystem token because I believe this ecosystem token, like I have a thesis on the ecosystem token itself. You know, sometimes when I come to an ecosystem, I'm like, okay, there's a Uniswap fork, there's a Solidly fork, there's a lending market, there's a meme coin, like, you know, for Sui, for example, right? Like what type of projects would you be looking at for a new ecosystem?
I think we obviously have a little bit of a unique perspective. So every single new ecosystem that's getting developed now either wants to be the Lido of an ecosystem. So it's like you've got to look at these X of Y's. So like the Lido, the Jupiter, I don't know, maybe even a Jito of. So you kind of see that like there's a lot of people like building the Jupiter of like Berichain, or like the Jupiter of, I think it's called Hop Protocol, Hop Finance or something on Sui. They're interesting predominantly because you can put all your trade executions through there. And if they don't have a token, it kind of plays into that strategy we've just previously spoke about. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. But again, as you previously mentioned, there can be a lot of wash volume, because the way you got to think about it is, despite teams being extremely smart in this space, they can also just look at kind of marketing strategies and tactics that have previously been done. So I can imagine if we do like an X of Y example, like a Jupiter of blah, 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 they're probably going to run the same playbook as what Jupiter did with their airdrop. And then people already understand how that game is played. They understand how the X of Y game is played for that specific token. So then they look at previous data, like who are the people who got the largest amount of airdrops, and then just go and replicate that and symbol it. So that's why like what we've had with Pump.Fun now, that's why it kind of died to death 3 months ago, because people were figuring out tools and figuring out how to bundle tokens and snap up 98% of the supply in the first couple of fucking blocks, and then that game's already won, and that game's already like any edge is being eroded completely away. So you need kind of like new games to play in, new ecosystem. So anything that's a little bit obscure that you manage to stumble upon and think, I haven't really seen anything like this before, that's usually where edge can be defined, because no one knows how to play that game.
Yeah, and it's interesting you use this as an example, because I think you're like an on-chain trader in that way you refer to, where it's like, I'm not gonna try to run a bundler, like I'm not trying to like do any of these like hacky things that like extract the last edge, but I'm gonna try to be like the first person to arrive at a specific narrative.
Yeah, you gotta be. But that's everything, like, and you only do that by being curious. Maybe it's a Sunday afternoon, like, and you're just going over to a new ecosystem and trying something out, and looking through DeFi Llama or looking on the CoinGecko ecosystem page, and then going to try some new stuff out. And it's usually just when you don't know your way around something, like every UI is forked. If it's like a little bit different and like the mechanisms underneath it are different, then there might be a different game to be played there, and that's where this edge is usually defined. That's where my largest wins have typically always been.
You think there's kind of a component of pattern recognition where it's like, okay, I have this new ecosystem that I'm curious about. I've seen this, but oh, this is interesting, and I see that, they raised or something, like there's some new component there.
I think it's you subconsciously just piece it all together. And we were speaking about this yesterday to quite a well-known marketer in the space, and it also points out a lot of red flags and what's not to like as well. So like if people are running like ridiculous onboarding kind of galaxy campaigns and shit like that, and it's a new protocol, it's been around for like 2 weeks and it's got like 200,000 followers and shit. It's just like, why would you ever need 200,000 followers?
Yeah. And
if you're sponsoring like the likes of Inter Miami and shit like that, it's like, where's the like developer grants and where's like that aspect of it? Because if you're marketing to like the average person and you're like a crypto infrastructure product, what are you wanting the end behavior of that result to be? It's you want them to buy the token. Why would you want them to buy the token? You probably need to secure some runway.
Right.
If you're developing to kind of force developers to come and build in your ecosystem, your head and your heart's probably in the right place with regards to that. So,
well, yeah, and I mean, you can see tokens in the top 100 or top 200, on CoinMarketCap, where it's like, oh, I this actually doesn't have an ecosystem at all. Like this isn't even on DeFi Llama, right? Like they claim to be an ecosystem, a chain, but it has 0 things being built on top of it, and that's when you know like the token is the product.
Yeah. But that can be quite bad in reverse, because I think Arbitrum's a great example of this, because Arbitrum has such a great ecosystem of developers and builders. And probably a less thought out token, maybe even token not needed, but we won't go down that route. But the outside perception can be bad token, bad product, and that's not always the case. The two shouldn't really be interlinked if there's no kind of, because like Arbitrum token basically does nothing in that ecosystem. It's for governance. But everything from a developer perspective in Arbitrum is probably the gold standard with regards to L2 currently. But it kind of has this like undercurrent of bad PR going around it, where it could be dissuading developers and could be dissuading like users. There's been a couple more different dynamics that happen in that Arbitrum governance forum, which we don't have like 6 hours, so I won't go into. But sometimes you can kind of get bad token, bad product, like misconstrued a little bit.
Right. You mentioned not round tripping. I remember the kind of start of the meme coin trade. You were tweeting about Kak Inu on Avalanche, and I bought it at like $7 million. And then it got to like $19 million, and I was like, hell yeah, big win. You know, that was kind of like the start of the bull market, especially for memes. So I was like, all right. And then it went on to like, I don't know, 20, 25x from there.
Yeah.
So like, how do you manage risk, or how do you like avoid round tripping while being able to preserve upside? Do you have like a specific strategy, or is it?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think I think there's someone like Altcoin Psycho who always had like this good framework, and it doesn't work for everything because you're never going to time the top. But instead of like selling half on a double, because that's like a typical strategy, some people say you should add more on a double. But
Right.
but if you can like generally for stuff like that where you know you kind of got this strong feeling that it's just going to continue, and it also depends on your entry as well, because like I think we picked it up like sub 1 mil or some shit like that.
Right.
So it was like really, really good trade. You just got to not get greedy as well. Take enough off where you're satisfied with. If you went to sleep, it'd be, and you went to sleep and it was zero the next day.
Right.
It'd be like completely, you wouldn't be happy about it, but you'd be like, all right, it's still relatively good trade. You probably need some kind of reference point to be able to check in with someone and be like, tell them what's happened. If you ever tell like your girlfriend or like your partner that like how much you're up or like anything along those lines, just sell as much as you can immediately. And you've also got to understand that there's other people who kind of go into the trade at the same time, and they're probably having the similar sort of thoughts as what you are at those specific times. It's kind of like this collective mind share when you're kind of in a position that's large, and that's why you kind of get these weird kind of patterns and fractals that kind of play out over different charts, over different kind of categories and over different kind of sectors and stuff. But usually I want to try and get a third out as soon as possible. Try and time the second third. Like you're going to sell one third way too early. You're going to try and time the top of like the middle third, and then you're going to sell the final third way too late. Like any of you can kind of just stick to that framework. You typically do all right. You're never going to time any of them perfectly, but you know, just like try not to be greedy. And it's always difficult because different people are in different phases of different cycles. And like that was like very early, as you previously mentioned. So you could have quite easily, like I'm pretty sure my brother got in like really, really, really early and then sold his full position and made like 10K. And then his position would have been like 2 million or something. Right. He just held on to it. So
well, yeah,
you're never going to like do everything correctly, but you've got to really understand when you're kind of going on a bit of tilt, and the kind of Gollum inside you is like telling you not to sell.
Yeah, and I mean, like I've gotten rugged. The thing is, for me personally at least, like I've gotten rugged on pool twos for like, you know, too much money, like so much money that I shouldn't even say it. But you end up like, I don't even care about that, right?
Yeah.
But then you like look, like I have a list of like all the times that I could have made like insane amounts of money, and that's what hurts like way more. Cocky News is probably one of them, but like you know, where it's like, oh damn, like I missed out on like, you know, 6 figures. Like that's the type of stuff that really
it's like the opportunity in the industry as well though. Like in any rational world, like a 2x, like how hard is it to get a sports bet right?
Right.
And you're getting like 4-to-1 returns or some shit like that, and like.
Well, the other thing is like I talked to my buddy about this, who's like my closest friend in the crypto space, and he's like, bro, you missed out on, you know, $200,000 by selling Mitchie early or something. And I'm like, yeah, but like it proves that I have like the capacity to identify a trend early. You know what I mean? Like the more times I miss out on generational wealth, it's just like, you know, proving that like I have the potential to do this, you know?
Yeah, I think like as this, I put a tweet out a couple of weeks back, and I think everyone was kind of like down in the dumps with all the chop, and I was just like, look, if you've previously made like an extremely large amount of money that you've never thought was physically possible, like think where you used to be and thought if you ever reached that amount, that'd be like life changing. Chances are, if you've done it before, you could do it again. It might not even be in crypto markets. It's just kind of a bit of hustle and kind of an awful lot of luck, which a lot of people don't like to put stuff down to, but if you kind of show up enough and you like work hard enough, I think you can kind of create your own luck in that regard.
Well, it's been interesting doing these podcast interviews here at Token 2049 because like I'll talk to you know, I've had the opportunity to talk to really successful founders, and you know, TN from Pendle's an example of this, right? Like, you know, he created a protocol that crossed $1 billion this winter in market cap, and it's like, damn, this guy like kind of made it.
Grinding
probably
as well. Like,
he's what?
Like, if you remember, like Time Wonderland era and stuff like that, they were creating yield tokens and principal tokens around that.
Right.
Nobody wanted to know.
Yeah, well, the thing that you know I'm going at is like he was working for Kyber Swap in 2017. He got into the space in 2014. Now, you know, he was around for Wonderland. Now he's like made it, right? You know, so it took him 10 years really to make it. So sometimes you see like, you know, and this is across industries, but like you see a one-hit wonder, or not a one-hit wonder, but you see a guy and it's like, you know, damn, this guy made it. I first heard about him a year ago, but he's been grinding in the industry for years and years.
It's like you hear kind of like bands do it all the time where it's like they just kind of explode on the scene and no one's ever heard of them. But,
right.
But it's like a 5-year overnight success kind
exactly.
of thing.
Yeah, that's what, yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. So, you know, you're talking a lot about like on-chain. What about leverage trading or trading the top 100 or, you know, majors? Like, what do you think about that for a smaller port?
I definitely wouldn't be touching leverage. I think altcoins have got their own internal leverage.
Right, exactly.
Which is a mixture of kind of, you know, just low liquidity and founder risk and all sorts of like weird dynamic leverage built into them that you don't necessarily need to go there, unless that's your strategy. But I really think I think we underappreciate sometimes like how in the weeds we are, like how few and how little people are actually operating on chain and going into like really obscure ecosystems to try and find like really like nuggets of alpha, you know. And it's like if you think back to 2017, 2018, 19, and then going into DeFi summer, the opportunity by just kind of exploring these new lands and getting on chain was just like so mind blowing compared to like everyone waiting to see if someone was going to be listed on Binance or like you've got, like, for me personally, that's just kind of what works, and that's kind of where my interests lie anyway. I'm not really interested in like people trade like leverage trade and like the Litecoin chart or the XRP chart.
Right.
Like that is the most boring shit ever to me. And they're the kind of people that say there's no innovation happening in the industry as well.
Right. And that's like almost like a different culture of people where they're like, you know, like studying indicators and stuff, or like they have like their Forex guy on YouTube that they look up to. What was I going to say? So you seem to always be in the trenches. So like I'll look at like the Latina AI shitter that's at like 80K and it's like Grant is following this account, or like some, you know, sold product where who knows if it's legit or it's a rug. And it's like a lot of people say, you know, hey, I'm sitting on my hands right now. I'm okay to sit on my hands for the next 6 months because I just don't have a take on the market right now. I think if I had to guess, you're like always in the trenches. And why do you kind of take this view?
It's partially it's a funny one because humans are quite interesting in the fact that when you have this kind of positive feedback loop on previous stuff that's always worked, then you tend to just kind of follow those same patterns.
Right.
Which is why I probably tend to outperform a lot of people in a uptrending market and then probably tend to give way too much back in a chopping market.
Right.
Whereas like range-bound traders will definitely outperform in those markets, but probably won't perform well in kind of like a long directional market. It's kind of a bit of paranoia that we won't be reporting and covering the next big thing as well. So I feel like a kind of duty to the team and like the brand and the company as a whole to be on the beat, like on absolutely everything. Like if we're not reporting on it and someone else gets there and it's already out and there's like a research report on it, it's just like we haven't done our job properly.
Right.
So there's a bit
you
of paranoia.
Want to be the first mover. Yeah.
At least a comprehensive review and like our take on it. And if we haven't done that, then like what's our position in the market? It's nothing really.
You mentioned giving a lot back to the market. You know, I think in a lot of ways it's like you know, everyone has experienced this like a massive loss, right? are giving a huge chunk of their net worth back. Some people get zeroed, you know, like I've talked to some people who say like, yeah, zeroing your account is like a rite of passage. Like you must do it. You know, well, first of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, what would you say to someone who's like recently, you know, zeroed or down bad? Like,
yeah, I think if it's like your first, or I think first cycle, you make money, you don't really know how you've made it, and then you give a drastic amount back and you pay like a tuition to the market. And I think the second time around, you try and overcompensate for you not understanding and probably mid-curve a lot, and then miss out on a lot of upside because you try and be more smart than you are right. Then equally give a lot back.
Right.
And then third and fourth and fifth, hopefully you're giving less and less and less back. But you're never going to time the top and you're never going to kind of buy the bottom. You kind of got to accept that you're going to kind of pay some tuition back. But again, what I was saying, like with people who are kind of struggling about, yeah, I might have fucked it here. Might have been my only opportunity at generation wealth. If you've put yourself in a position where you've had to learn this like extremely naive technology and figure out an edge to kind of win in the space. And even if the edge came from networking, or if it came from figuring out a way to kind of build edge on chain, or through whatever angle it is, that is like a translatable skill that can be like passed on through not just crypto, like it can go much, much further away. So I think that kind of person that is so like early adopter and trying to seek out edge and opportunity is always probably going to be successful if they just kind of continue and be consistent with it as well. So like if you've done it before, you can do it again, I think.
Right. Even if that exists in a context outside of crypto.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's so many kind of translatable skills that people wouldn't truly appreciate.
What about that idea of like employment that you kind of referred to early on? And then obviously you have maintained employment and focused on building an incredibly successful media brand within the space, despite being like this on-chain degen trader. Like, why have you chosen to do both of these things at the same time?
I think they go kind of hand in hand with each other. And I think you need something to occupy your mind and kind of sense of like purpose and self-worth during times that are like this, because you'll go insane.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, dude. Sometimes I think about traders and I'm like, damn,
what are they doing at this point? Like,
yeah. Well, it seems like so wild for that to be like your only thing. And like that the amount of times I've like stressed out way too much over trade is like, if that was the only thing I was doing, if I couldn't like have the stability of like, okay, I have to work today, it would be so like emotionally
it could be like
hard.
quite lonely as well if you're doing that. But yeah, I think like the trading in the portfolio is like obviously a lovely thing to have, and then it's if that is what you tie your life and soul to, then you're gonna be a very kind of overly emotional person, particularly in this industry, I think, because it's extremely volatile and never know what's around the corner. And then you're kind of hedging it with like a more longer term, I'd say stable, but media is like inherently reflexive with crypto markets as well, because ads dry up and sponsorships dry up and stuff like that. But I think you just need something to, and even if it's just like more of a creative pursuit as well, so kind of like satisfying both sides of the brain, you know. Yeah, I think you need, I think like even the likes of Choppy have always said, like they, despite any market, they've always got something that's their number one focus outside of trading. Like I think he was previously at the likes of Monzo, which is a huge UK bank, and now they're building Echo and shit like that. So like you always got to have something going on, so you're not solely just tethered to P&L. That must be quite a lonely place, I think.
You've done a phenomenal job of like building a network, and you know, both personally and then this network associated with this brand and the people who are interested in Blocmates and follow you guys. What advice, you know, to someone who's new to the space, what advice would you give them around like, I want to get in a group chat, I want alpha, I want to see the next good shitter before I see it on Deck Screener? Yeah,
I think now more than ever, and it's not just, I don't think it's local to crypto, but I think social media is the new CV. I think it's not just me saying that, there's a lot of people saying that, but I like truly believe it. If you're consistent, which is a key, everyone wants to like like what we were saying, it like the 5-year overnight success. Everyone wants like the success part, but no one wants to do the 5-year part.
Right.
So you kind of got to be consistent enough. And now more than ever, the way that kind of the algorithm is changing, it's really valuing kind of consistency and value. But you've kind of got to keep on top of that. But that's a total different conversation. Be consistent. Add value as much as you can, and do not be scared to kind of message people, because out of any industry that I've ever worked in, this is probably the most accommodating and open and inviting. There'll be certain like groups that will just completely ignore you, and you kind of got to accept it for what it's worth until you prove your worth. But I don't think there's a better industry to be working in on the planet at the minute if you're kind of going from zero to wanting to make something of yourself.
I absolutely agree. Plus, I think it's a more meritocratic industry than most, right? Where it's like, if I'm from like Bangladesh or whatever, and I want to get in this industry and I can provide value, then you can make it in the industry. You can make a competitive salary.
And it's so easy to discern what the meritocracy is, because if you were super early to someone, you've been shouting from the rooftops about something, and then they're playing for everyone to see, and you do it 2 or 3, 4 times, it's just like, it's so easily weighed up. Whereas some industries, it's a little bit more who you know, like
right,
a lot of kind of weird,
or even just like certifications, education.
Yeah, like how much can you pay for this degree, or how much, like, what school did you go to, or what access do you have? And I think that stuff's just completely kind of flatlined in this industry.
There are a lot of people that are jaded right now that said, like, you know, the Solana bubble was fake, it was VCs, and then memes sucked the liquidity out of the space, and blah blah blah. Do you think we'll ever get a bull market as good as 2020, 2021?
Not to kind of break everyone's hearts, but I don't think it'll be as extreme as that. But everyone says that every time around. But I think that was just a very unique point in time with everything that was going on globally.
Right.
Won't say what, because it'll probably get your podcast demonetized on YouTube. And that was just like a very, very, very odd point in time with like this ever-ending liquidity coming into market with extremely low cost of capital. I do think you'll tend to. I don't think like this might be a little bit bull hopium, but I honestly don't think like the cycle's actually started. I think what we've just previously had with memes was closer to what we've seen in DeFi Summer, where this new casino had opened,
right,
and there was a lot of opportunity in one specific part of that casino, and then people flooded into that, and then that edge has been completely eroded away, which happened in 2019, 2020 with DeFi Summer. All the on-chain Pool 2 Ponzi games that were getting played, and then like it went on to like a much wider, bigger bull market. Right. So I don't necessarily think we've had like a crypto global bull market where everything's just ripping. You could kind of open CoinGecko one morning, just throw a dart at the screen, you could be up 10x in a couple of weeks. That's never happened, but I think we probably will verge into that, but I think it will be a little bit more controlled. So sectors are gonna probably move a lot stronger, like AI sector, deep in sector. Maybe you'll get a resurgence of memes, but I don't necessarily think so. And I can imagine like DeFi as a sector, anything that's had a little bit of lindiness is probably going to run quite hard as well. But I don't think it'll be as extreme as what's previously getting. I think each progressive intracycle within a larger cycle is probably going to be a little bit less explosive.
Right. Plus, you know, like in 2020, market cap was, you know, probably an order of magnitude lower than it was today, or nearly. So like the amount of capital that would be required to be as explosive from, you know, $2 trillion to whatever, $20 trillion would be so much. However, that doesn't mean there's not going to be tons of opportunities or tons of things that 100x,
well, that's
1000x.
it. There'll be outsized returns within that. Like if we're using that as an average or a median, like if you're holding an index, then it's probably not going to be as explosive. But then there's also going to be new shit that comes on the market that is such an outperform that you can't even wrap your head around how well it's going to perform. And that's what I mean. Like to kind of wrap up everything that we've talked about is being curious and being early at stuff. Because if you're just holding an index of like ridiculous tokens and you're expecting that to outperform, the industry moves so quick that probably 90% of what you're holding is absolutely irrelevant.
Right. Excellent. I guess that's a good note to wrap it up on. Be curious. Any other insights you might give to someone who's in the market right now?
Yeah, be curious. try a lot of shit out. You can also hold like this thing called USDC and USDT as well. And yeah, if you're kind of stuck for that kind of tribe as well, like Blockmates Discord's always open for anyone. It's completely free. You can always jump in there.
Excellent.
I might roast your bags if they're a lot of shit, but you can still ask anyway.
Phenomenal. Awesome. Grant, Blockmates, thanks so much. And yeah, check out the Discord.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks.